This evening, and boy is he an interesting guy. He is. All right, this is Anthony Delgado. He is a 9th generation Canary Island descendant and 11th generation Tejano. And he's extremely proud of his connections, his familial connections to some of the most notable Hispanic figures in Texas history, spanning the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. And that includes the first Spanish colonial families that founded what we now know as San Antonio. Anthony recently retired after having served the United States in the Air Force for 40 years. This guy was in Air Force for 40 years. Don't look old enough, man. You don't. All right, and he was a human resource management business analyst and an information technology project manager. He enjoys serving his community. He is a member of he is president now, the newly elected president of the Wilson County Historical Commission and the Wilson County Historical Society, and he is also the chair of the Trail de Flores chapter of El Camino Real de los Tejas National Historic Trail Association. Some people really volunteer a lot. Very good, Anthony. He's a member of the Canary Islands Descendants Association, and he's also a member and former chairman, board of directors of the Los Bereños. Bereños? Thank you. Okay, Genealogical and Historical Society, a local Hispanic genealogy society. And he is the host, owner, and founder of Hispanic Heritage Matters in Texas, where he facilitates digital conversations among his 3,300 plus followers, sharing Texas Hispanic history and heritage. Okay, busy guy. He recently created the Hispanic Heritage Coalition. It's a collaboration with San Antonio area-based, all are San Antonio area organizations focused on researching and promoting our shared Hispanic history and heritage. His passion for genealogy, with a concentrated focus on Hispanic genealogy, has afforded him opportunities to meet many wonderful individuals, including all of us, I'm sure. Absolutely. All with a passion to learn and celebrate their family histories. He eagerly and proudly shares with others the fascinating and rich history he has come to learn and love. Anthony Delgado.
Thank you so much. I've got the mic here. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Nams?
That's the presentation. Any questions? Well, thank you, Elaine, and Trudy, for inviting me here this evening to share with you a little bit about some history of San Antonio and the area, but more importantly, La Vernia, right? So this is the La Vernia Historical Association. So hopefully tonight you'll learn a little bit more about the place where we love. I will get choked up because I get emotional when I talk about family, so just bear with me.
I love it.
How many historians do we have in the room? Yeah, okay. So throughout the presentation, if I say something wrong, it's not factual. If you're going to throw something, just make sure it doesn't hurt anybody else. But I will gladly talk afterwards, and I'm open to criticism, so anything you can help me learn. I'm not a historian, I'm a business major. And when I came to learn about my family history, I have this tree, and I've got all these names, but there was something missing, right? So I had a name, and I had a date, right? And I had a dash, and I had another date. And it was like, okay, but where did this person live? What did they do? Why does this name look familiar? Again, I'm not a historian, I'm a business major. I use that wonderful genealogical tool called Google. And so I Google names, and then I begin to understand the history. So tonight I'm sharing with you things that I have learned, not because of my education, but, my education in family history by doing my family history. So I'm not educated through formal education in history, but I think I have learned a thing or two. So let's talk a little bit about Canary Islanders in Lavernia. So tonight we're going to talk about who were the Canary Islanders, why them, why did they come to this area? We'll also talk about their significance in Texas, and then we'll kind of wrap up and talk about Canary Islanders in Lavernia. So who understands the Canary Islands story as it pertains to San Antonio in Texas? Okay, a couple of you. Excellent. There's also Canary Islanders elsewhere in North America and throughout the Americas. The Canary Islands were one of the places where many of the Europeans would stop on their way to travel. I got a phone call, an email or phone call, and an email talking about the Delgados in Louisiana. So there are Canary Islanders in Louisiana, but we're going to talk about the ones in San Antonio and more importantly the ones here in Lavernia. So why the Canary Islands? So you might remember a story about Fort St. Louis, Matagorda Bay, Sur de la Salle, right? So we're talking late 17th century, the French, so the story goes, there's this mistake, right? He thought he was going up the Mississippi. He ends up crash landing in Matagorda Bay, builds this fort. Spain finds out that there's the French on Spanish territory, because at that time, Spain had claimed basically from right about the other side of the Sabine River all the way west, right? So all of that was Spanish territory, to include present-day Texas. And so the French are there, and so they said, okay, well, wait a minute, we can't have that, right? So fast forward, there's a Marqués de Aguayo. He puts together a plan. How many of you are familiar with government? You've been involved with the government, local government, city government, federal government? Yeah, when you put a plan together and you put it before the officials, it takes a while, right? So over a decade or so, the king says, yes, yea, verily, let's populate this place called La Provincia de Texas. And let's take some of our citizens and let's place them in kind of like a buffer zone where we can kind of keep the French at bay, right? And kind of protect-ish our resources on the west side of the Rio Bravo, right? So that river that runs what we now call the border between Texas and Mexico. Back then it wasn't a border, but that's where most of the population was inland, right? So on the other side of the river. On this side of the river, there wasn't much at all, other than, of course, Ted and his family, the native indigenous, right, who have been here for thousands of years. But Spain had staked a claim, and they wanted some citizens there, so they put out a call. And who answered the call? Some Canary Islanders. So who were those Canary Islanders? So there were 56 individuals that came from 4 of the islands. There's now a total of 8. Many of them came from Lanzarote. Others came from Tenerife, Gran Canaria, and La Palma. 16 families. Originally, when they departed in March of 1730, there were 25 families. And then from the Canary Islands, they go by ship to Cuba. They stopped over in Havana. I don't know if it was a recreational trip like many of our families may have done in the 50s. But nonetheless, they were there for a couple of weeks, resupplied, but only 10 families show up at Veracruz. So one of the challenges that we have, we the Canary Islanders that are here, is to find out, well, what happened to the other 15 families? One of those families that left in March of 1730 was Lucas Delgado and his wife, Maria Melian. I have found, just this past year, a document that says Lucas left with his wife and his children. Yep, check, we got that. But he also left with his mother-in-law. Never heard that before. She never shows up in Veracruz. He also had a child named Manuel. I never knew that. And when you look at our documents, even the documents that we have online, and you look at the Delgado family, Manuel is not mentioned because he never showed up. So where is Manuel Delgado? Remember that television and then those cartoons? Where is Waldo? So I need some help. We need to find where is Manuel. So we're going to start a challenge here, and we're going to find where Manuel is. So the king says that they're going to send some Canary Islanders. Originally it was 400. So by the time all the plans happen and then folks actually show up, there's 56. There was originally 52, and it's not really 16 families because when they arrived in Veracruz, they learned that if you were married, you got some land. So my 6 times great-grandfather, who was 17 years old, decides that he's going to marry the 16-year-old girl from the Leal family, and so now he forms the 12th family, and he gets some land. And so there are other marriages that happen while they're on their way from Veracruz to San Antonio, and so those 10 families become 16. And so when we look at the Spanish record, the Spanish were wonderful about keeping records. So there are 3 censuses that were taken in 1730 while the families are traveling. The November 1730 census is wonderful. If you have an opportunity, go online to our CETA, oh, you can't read that very well, CETA-SA.org, and then you can find not just the names, but the physical descriptions of our ancestors. The Spanish would write down, oh yeah, Juan Leal Goraz was 54 at the time that he came over. He was blind in his left eye. He had a gray beard. We learned that Maria Robena, sometimes people call her, she was also known as Maria Robena de Betancourt. She had red hair, light skinned, a sharp nose. So it's amazing how you can learn about those things, about your ancestors, by looking at some of those records. So they get to Veracruz. Speaking of Maria Robena, she was pregnant when she left the islands. How do we know that? Because when she gets to Veracruz and they're on their way, she gives birth to Juan de Acuña. She names him after the Marqués de Acuña. So she gives birth to Juan de Acuña. Can you imagine? I mean, women, God bless you. But I could not imagine being on a ship and then having to travel from Veracruz to San Antonio, along the way giving birth, and then continuing on the journey after bearing the child. Whew, what a woman. So on our website, you can find those physical descriptions of each members of the 16 families. The 16th family was actually made up of 2 sets of brothers. There was Felipe and Jose Antonio Perez Casanova, and then there was Martin and Ignacio Lorenzo de Armas. And so the Spanish kind of pulled them together and said, okay, we're going to call you a family, so you get to appreciate some of those rights as well, and you get some land and some property. So that's who the Canary Islanders were. That's why they came. So now let's look at a little bit about what significance did they have here in Texas, right? So when they came into La Provincia de Texas, the Spanish had already been here. So you might remember San Antonio celebrated its 300th anniversary in 2018. Well, in 1718, there was a presidio that was set up, Presidio San Antonio de Béjar, and then there was a Mission San Antonio de Valero, was set up in 1718. And so when the Canary Islanders came, they had already joined a community that had already been here for 13 years. But on their journey, somebody decided, I guess the king had decided, that what he was going to do was he was going to rename it. And so he was going to rename it in honor of King Ferdinand, and so they named the area San Fernando de Béjar. So they established the Villa San Fernando de Béjar. In August of 1731, they established the first government in Texas. How many of you know that in your government books? Yeah, you better not raise your hand because it's not there. It's not in the history books either. That the first government in Texas is established by the Canary Islanders August 1st of 1731. And there is of course, what did the Spanish do? They read a document and they named each of the officials. Juan Leal Goraz, the elder, is the leader of the family when they traveled, and he is elected as the first alcalde, so the first judge, mayor, magistrate is kind of those 3 positions today, all wrapped up into the primer alcalde. So he was the first alcalde, and then you see the names of the regidores, the councilmen. So you would see their names. Vicente Travieso was the alguacil mayor, so he was the first constable. And what's really cool is Bexar County recognizes that history, and on the side of their vehicles they have Bexar County Sheriff established 1731 in honor of Vicente Travieso, who was the first constable established in 1731. And he served, these appointments that were made were lifetime appointments, even though they had to be elected. They couldn't serve more, the alcaldes couldn't serve more than one term. So they had term limits, imagine that. So they had term limits, they could serve more than, no more than one, they couldn't serve consecutively. They could serve again, and we have some individuals that served more than 5 times, but others may have served only once. So you have one-year term, and then elections come again. So they established the first civil government, they established the Villa San Fernando de Bexar. They established as part of the plan that was required by the law of the Indies, they established San Fernando Cathedral. Today's cathedral was a church then. So they established it, and it was the center of the village, of the villa. And then around the Plaza de las Islas, today it's called Main Plaza. So around the plaza were the houses that they drew lots in July of 1731, and then they staked their claim. The Bexar County Courthouse, I'll show you on a slide here in a minute, it stands on the property that belonged to Juan Leal Duras, the first alcalde. That was his property. So they established a first government. The Canary Islanders thought because they were given this decree by the king, and they were brought here and they're given land, I guess some of our ancestors took that to heart, and they thought, well, you know, I have a proclamation from the king. I don't know about the rest of you. So they were dominant on the town council, and there was, when you read some of De La Teja, Jesus, Francisco de la Teja, when you read Dr. de la Teja's books, you can learn more about this friction between the Presidio soldiers, the Canary Islanders, and the mission friars, as well as the Native Americans that were part of the missions. There were battles over, not fist fights, but legal fights over access to water, access to land. In 1745, we have this group of citizens that are filing a lawsuit against the mission friars for access to land. They also want the Native Americans that were in the missions to be part of their labor. Well, you know, you're doing all this work for the missions. They have, and we'll see in a minute, vast ranch lands, right? They have crops, and wait a minute, that's what we're supposed to be doing as civilians of this community. We're supposed to be raising crops and cattle and feeding the citizens. So we want that labor that you're appreciating in the mission. So there's this battle that goes on. It's phenomenal when you look at those records. Antonio Rodriguez, originally from La Palma, is one of the architects of the acequia system. And it's interesting, so not only do they have confrontations, arguments with the Presidio soldiers, the Canary Islanders also have arguments among themselves. And we find the town council going after and arresting Antonio Rodriguez for the work that he's doing for the missions to provide the acequias for the missions, and he's not doing it for the town, and so they have him arrested. It's amazing the kinds of things that you find in those in the history books. Not the history books that you find in the schools. So we talk about vast ranch lands, and this is a thing that I think is so phenomenal about this area and this area's history. So what you see here is a cutout, an excerpt from Seeds of Bexar. Bexar County, in part of their celebrations for the 300th anniversary, partnered with UTSA Center for Archaeological Research. The Center for Archaeological Research dug into the archives, and they put together this map, and it's an interactive map. So if you have an opportunity, and y'all are interested in history because you wouldn't otherwise be here tonight, right? So I would highly suggest that you go to Seeds of Bexar, just Google Seeds of Bexar, Bexar history, and you'll find this interactive map. You scroll down, you click on early ranching, and then you scroll down the page, and then as you scroll down the page, the views change. And eventually you'll get to this map that you can interact with. Unfortunately, what they didn't do was put names on the pasture lands. So you won't find this version. I made this version based off of work that Judge Tonoff and Jack Jackson had done. But you'll find the outlines. So the outlines are exactly, they exactly match the work that Tonoff did. So I highlight this here to show you that from north of San Antonio, in an earlier view of the Mission Ranch lands, you've got ranches that are north of San Antonio, out towards New Braunfels, all the way down. And the other cool thing is the map that you look at is superimposed on today's view. So you can see New Braunfels, you can see Victoria, you can see Floresville, and you're going to go down past Victoria. And that was all the mission. At one time, those were the mission lands. And then over a period of time, when you get to the mid-1700s, then we have individuals that are starting to get access to those pasture lands. And those that are in bold are ranches that were owned by Canary Islanders, original Canary Islanders, or their children by the time the mid-1700s and the 1800s come around. So they have access to all this pasture land. They're raising cattle. I know there's at least one person in here from the Daughters of the American Revolution. I take my hat off to you and all those that are in the Daughters of the American Revolution, because it's that organization that is bringing attention to the wonderful work that Judge Tonoff did and recognizing our ancestors, I say our ancestors' history in providing cattle to the American Revolution. So 6 years ago, if I was on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I'm on that last question for $1 million, and they said, what was Texas' connection to the American Revolution? I would have chosen D, none of the above. Because, you think about the American Revolution, you think about the 13 colonies, right? But lo and behold, our ancestors, and thanks to the DAR, here are 25 names of individuals. Many of them are Canary Islanders or descendants of Canary Islanders who have been recognized as patriots in the American Revolution because of their contributions, again, because of the wonderful work that Judge Tonoff has done. So the other thing that I think is pretty phenomenal, and this is why I want to have a conversation with a couple of you after this meeting, is because if you look and you zoom in, especially on the Seeds of Bear, because it comes up much better, most of these ranches are in Wilson County. Why is it that Wilson County doesn't get the attention or the recognition that, in my humble opinion, it deserves? Because this is where those cattle came from. Our ancestors were working the cattle on these ranches in Wilson County. It's not Bear County. Well, it is, because at that time it was Beja, right? And Wilson County didn't come along until 1860. And because of that, people say, Wilson County? 1860? There's no history in Wilson County. Hold on a minute. So I wanted to share that with you. Really, the main reason is because of the fact that we have so much history in our county. Some of them are in the Livonia area. And we need to rise up and let folks know about that history. Again, thanks to recognition from the DAR for all that they've done to recognize the underlying names are individuals that were Canary Islanders, original Canary Islanders. Leonor Delgado, she was 6 years old by the time she showed up in 1731. She eventually inherits the Flores Rancho from her husband, who dies in 1779. And she doesn't die until sometime after 1805. And she's managing the Flores Ranch from 1779 up until the time that she then lets her children run it. So one of those children is Joaquin Leal. This is her son. He's also a patriot of the American Revolution. Again, a descendant from not only Leonor Delgado, but also from his father, Bernardo Leal. He's the grandson of the Alcalde Juan Leal Goraz. Some of the struggles for independence, the Canary Islanders were also part of the revolution that happened in 1813. How many of you are familiar with the Texas Revolution in 1813? Yeah, a couple of us, right? So that's another thing that's not talked about much, and you don't find much reference. There is some reference, but not much reference in the textbooks about Texas's first Declaration of Independence in April of 1813. Texas's first revolution. And so what we find is some of these Canary Islanders, well, actually, most of the Canary Islanders that were here, they were rebel rousers when they first got here. They were rebel rousers up to the 70s. And come the 19th century, they continued to be rebel rousers. Many of them joined Bernardo Gutierrez de Lara in the revolution against the Spanish crown. And so you have the Battle of Rocio Creek, you have the Battle of Alazan, you then have the large battle, the bloodiest battle, according to some, on Texas soil is the Battle of Medina, just south of San Antonio, near the Medina River. There's also this big oak field. That's where the battle took place as a result of Father Hidalgo's cry, his grito, right? He wanted to get out from underneath the Spanish crown. He wanted to see that the indigenous and the mestizos were treated properly. And so the folks here in San Antonio felt the same way. We wanted, our ancestors wanted to get out from underneath the crown. We have a governor who's not even in the area. We have the viceroy who's never been in San Antonio. We have the king who's in Spain, and you're telling us how to live our lives, but you don't understand what it's like here in La Provincia de Texas. You haven't been here. You don't know the struggles. And so they wanted their freedom. And they fought for that freedom. And they lost. Joaquin Leal, the gentleman I just showed you earlier, who's a patriot of the American Revolution, was 67 years old at the time that the Battle of Medina took place. One of my great-grandfathers. He and his wife, Ana Maria de Rocha, and their children had to flee San Antonio following the Battle of Medina because they had a bounty on their head. They fled to the Trinity River. He and his 3 sons didn't make it. They were captured by Lieutenant Colonel Ignacio Elizondo. How do we know this? Because Elizondo did what his predecessors had done and kept excellent records. And in his record, he describes his execution of the Leal sons. They capture Joaquin Leal and they take him to, then it was called La Trinidad, which was a fort between here and the Trinity. They capture him, return him there, and they execute him there at La Trinidad. Elizondo also talks about how he executed Antonio Delgado. You may have read in the books about this occurrence that happens where the governor is beheaded. Supposedly Antonio Delgado is the one who beheaded them. And so Elizondo then takes his wrath out on Antonio Delgado, and he describes how he had been lanced. He falls off his horse. His mother, Angela Rocha, is holding him in her arms while the lieutenant is continuing to lance him and kill him in his mother's arm. That's the kind of description that we learn about in some of those records. Phenomenal history. But so they're part of the struggle for independence in 1813. This is a record out of Jack Jackson's book. It comes from a record that's in the National Archives in Mexico. There's a copy in the Catholic Archives in Austin. And when they inventoried the property of all these rebels, they named the rebels, they inventoried their property, then they had a team of about 6 or 7 experts. We had masons, they had cattle ranchers that would appraise the property and then put the property up for sale. And I highlight this because they also captured the cattle brands for the cattle that was seized and the number of cattle that were seized. And then I went back and I've added the asterisk to show you the relationship of them to the Canary Islanders. Some of them are the sons or the grandsons of the original Canary Islanders.
Anthony,
Fascinating book.
What's the name of that book?
Los Costeños by Jack Jackson. This is appendix.
It's a red book.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the big one.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. They continued, their descendants continued, much like, many of our ancestors were part, especially some of you in here, many of your ancestors may have come here during the colonization efforts that started around 1820s. Some of your ancestors may have been alongside of our Canary Islander ancestors that were part of the struggle for the second Texas Revolution, right? 1835, 1836. We've got many of them that are part of Juan Seguin's troops during the siege of Béjar. One gentleman, Martín Delgado, is interesting. When you go through the GLO and you look at, the Texas Library and Archives, when you go through the Republic claims, there is a claim by the name of Martín Delgado, and he says that he was part of the Battle of Concepcion, which is about 1835 time frame. Well, let's say so they went through that. They've got all kinds of affidavits, and so they approve his pension because of his participation during 1835, 1836 as serving under Juan Seguin in the Battle of Concepcion. He was 14 years old. So he lied when he went in service because, of course, 14-year-olds aren't supposed to have been part of the army. But that was the kind of conviction that he is the descendant of the Delgados that rose up in 1813. He is the grandson of Clemente Delgado, who was one of the leaders. I have this picture here. It's phenomenal. Maria Gertrudis Navarro de Cantu, she was a survivor of the Battle of the Alamo. She's there alongside with her sister, attending to Jimbuy. She is also a descendant of the Canary Islanders. This is me holding her picture. This is my third times great grandmother. The picture is at the University of Texas in Austin. And then when we did when they had the Tejano Monument unveiling, I went and then I was able to see her and hold her picture. Phenomenal experience. And then we also have some individuals that were part of Seguin's troops at the Battle of San Jacinto. So that's the background to the Canary Islanders, why they got here as part of the King's plan, and they settled. So what is the connection between the Canary Islanders that were in Béjar and La Vernia? Anybody know yet? No? So in 1831, there was a gentleman by the name of Juan Delgado who petitions for a land grant and is granted. He has property that we'll look at here in just a second, smack dab downtown La Vernia was the Juan Delgado land grant. He gets, like many others that applied for and were approved, he gets a league and a sitio and a labor, right? So a league and a labor of land. So 4,177 acres is what he is given. But with that came requirements, right? So he had to have a house. He had to be situated there for a number of years. And in doing the research, I didn't find where he had met all of the requirements to maintain that land. As a matter of fact, just days after he gets his head right, he sells it. But he's still in the La Vernia area. He's still in Wilson County. We do find him in later census where he is now a little bit further south, more towards, I guess it's southwest, out near Helton Park in that area. So that's where he becomes domiciled, and we find him in some of those census records. But that's the connection. Juan Delgado, and who is Juan Delgado? Let's look at his property. So here's the land grant. This is from the General Land Office. This is a snapshot from their website. Again, like the Seeds of Beer, you can superimpose, you can drill down, and you see it's imposed on the original land grants are superimposed on today's map. So you've got HEB is here. You've got it goes past. This is 1346. This is 775. So his land grant. This is the 4,000 acres. This is the 177. Is smack dab downtown La Vernia. So who was Juan Delgado? Juan Delgado was born around 1789. He's the son of Amador Delgado and Casiana Galvan. Juan Amador Delgado is the son of Juan Delgado and Catarina Leal. On the earlier slide where I showed the 16, where I talked about the 16 families, Juan Delgado was the head of the 12th family. His wife was Catarina Leal. This is their son, this is their grandson. Phenomenal. There's a gentleman by the name of Bishop Robert Giffen. I don't know if any of you are part of the Anglican Church here in the area. He's an Anglican bishop. He has original oil paintings of so many of his ancestors. I am jealous. Well, this happens to be one of his ancestors, Concepcion Cepeda, and she was married to Juan Delgado. That was his first wife. When she dies, he remarries to Casiana Galvan. To Refugia Hill. But he also has Concepcion's mother's painting, Justa Travieso, who was born in the early 1700s after their arrival, and she lives on and into the 1800s. It's phenomenal. So it says, what a treasure to have that. And he allowed me to borrow it and to put onto this slide so that you can get an idea of what this person may have looked like as opposed to just seeing the name. Juan dies here in Wilson County in 1870. Again, he's the grandson of the original Canary Islanders that came in 1731. So they had their homes around the Plaza de las Islas in San Fernando. They also had ranches as far south as the Wilson County, Karnes County. The Las Mulas, the Travieso Ranch, was further south. And so as they traversed the area, some of them, Juan Delgado in particular, decided that this was a nice place to call home. And I think many of us would agree that this is probably a really nice place to call home because we're here. That is this evening's presentation. Any questions about the Canary Islanders? Any questions about Juan Delgado and the connection to the Canary Islanders and here in Lavernia? Yes, sir.
Why did they land in Veracruz? Why didn't they go farther up the coast?
So that's a good question, right? That many people have asked. Why did they land at Veracruz as opposed to maybe Galveston or Corpus? Because remember earlier, I talked about the fact that nothing had come on this side of the Rio Grande as far as Spanish, Presidio Spanish settlements. So there was no soldiers that were garrisoned here. There was no protection for them. So if they were to land, then they would have to bring a contingent, and they also hadn't at that time they hadn't laid out their path yet from what we now call the Gulf Coast to San Antonio. Right? They had already established the Camino Real from various places on the Texas border, coming from the innards of Mexico into Texas. Those roads had already been established, and so for them to land at Veracruz, that was a natural port. They had already been sending ships for hundreds of years to Veracruz. They had garrisons there along the way to San Juan Bautista, which is present-day Guerrero, so they had a presidio there. They had established presidios in East Texas, but they really weren't comfortable arriving in the Gulf Coast and then making their way blindly, if that my words, blindly up to San Antonio. It would have been shorter, but they didn't have an established route, and they didn't have anybody here to provide them safe travels. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned that there was other Canary Islands throughout the United States, or is it just Texas?
No, yes. So our ancestors get here in 1731. From 1778 to 1783, over 2,000 Canary Islanders go to the New Orleans area in Louisiana to help Galvez and the Spanish Army, along with their contributions to the American Revolution.
So have you found out how far in North Texas have they gone? Or is it like San Antonio and north of San Antonio?
Over the years or then? Then they were here.
Just here.
Yeah, and because at that time, you were not allowed, by Spanish law, you weren't allowed to travel without the governor's permission. So you couldn't just get up and go and say, hey, honey, let's jump on the horse. Let's go check out Nacogdoches. Let's go check out New Orleans. No. you had to have permission. And so, as my son Evan says, we've been here 300 years and the furthest we've gone is 20 miles. Really? That's it? Yeah, so they were here and they were required to, now, eventually, over the years, one of Juan Leal Goraz's sons is frustrated. He basically says, Béjar offers nothing for me. So he packs up his family, gets permission, and he goes to Santa Rosa, which is in Coahuila, and that's where they had a presidio. And so he becomes a presidio soldier in Coahuila for probably a decade or two, and then they come back. And so you'll find a lot of Leals and you'll find a lot of Rochas in present-day Mexico, because some of them did get up and leave. At those times, most of the hill country and north were, at that time, was a little dangerous to be out and about on your own. You had a question? Yes, ma'am.
Reference a site, seed, something?
Seeds of Bear.
S-E-E-D-S?
S-E-E-D-S. Seeds, like when you plant seeds. Yes, ma'am. Seeds of Bear. Look up, if I was doing Google, I would put Seeds of Bear, Bear Heritage. And then you should get to the bearheritage.org website and Seeds of Bear, and then you'll see a page, and there'll be a bunch of looks like little Word documents, and they'll have early colonial life, acequias, early ranching. Early ranching is where I got that map from.
The land that we have was originally owned by Francisco Herrera. Is he a Canary Islander?
I'd have to look at the genealogy.
So if I look at this seed, I could probably research that.
The Seeds of Bear will tell you about the lands and how it transitioned from the mission lands to many of the private ranchers, but they don't have names of all of the ranch owners, unfortunately.
It'd be a nice starting point.
It would be a great starting point to understand the ranch lands, but I've got a card if you're interested. I'll be happy to help you understand if there's a connection with the Herreras. Ted, you know any connection with the Herreras and the local Herrera family?
Yeah, the Paul Revere of the Alamo.
Blas Herrera. There you go.
They have a big family descendants around
La Soya.
And so they were probably in this area also.
Because in our deed, my dad didn't buy it he bought it from Mr. Ward, who owned many acres. And then Daddy ended up buying 46 of those acres, but the original deed has that Francisco Herrera name on it.
Excellent.
Because they own so much land back
Right,
then.
yeah. Thousands of
You know,
acres.
we think a big ranch is 400 acres.
No, that was like
It's
about
nothing.
4,000.
Yeah,
or more.
thousands and thousands
Yeah.
of acres.
Yeah, the Simon de Rocha
my
and Juan de
grandfather.
Rocha land grant was 36,000 acres, and when you look at the map, you'll see that it was just basically a square that he had. So here's San Rafael. This is the Simon de Rocha, and so what's interesting is when you look at it, all of this area, to include let's see this piece here, all of this was a Rocha property. From him, this is his daughter and son-in-law. This is his
brother. Juan.
no, this is Maria Calvillo.
Oh, yeah,
Her mother was a Rocha, that was his sister. So you've got from south of Floresville, going up 181, through Helton Park, up to Elmendorf, all of that land belonged to a family. Phenomenal. There was a question, yes ma'am?
Tell us about the clothing you wore from Did you research that?
I'm sorry?
Your clothing, did you research that?
Oh, my clothing, yeah, because I saw somebody point earlier and they probably were wondering, what the hell is he doing? So this is what they call traje típico. So this is Canary Island dress. This is called a campesino. So this outfit would be a campesino outfit. So that's a farmer's outfit. And so in my bag, I would have potatoes that I would plant. And so this was the common dress for probably the late 17th into the 18th century from the Canary Islands. But when they came here, there's no way that they would have been wearing what our ancestors wore in the Canary Islands. I don't think. And so we talk about Los Mesteños. If you haven't seen the book Los Mesteños, I would highly, highly recommend it. On the front cover, it says 1721 to 1821, ranching life in Texas. But Jack Jackson did a phenomenal job in researching everything that happened here from 1721 to 1821, to include the battles and all that. But in one of those pages, he talks about a 1745 visit by a gentleman, and Alan, you can probably help me here. The Pages, P-A-I-G-E-S, the Pages, was an official of some sort who comes through here, and he describes what he's seeing on this horseman who's got this elaborate dress. When you read the description, you think of the charros. When you go to the charreada that they have in San Antonio during fiesta, and you see the charros, and they have their silver buttons and all of them. Yeah, so this is the description from 1745 of the common guy in the area who's on horseback. So they probably wouldn't be wearing this. But thank you for the question. That's great. Yes, sir.
On that map, Anthony, can you see where Rancho de las Cabras would have been located?
So here is Las Cabras here.
Okay.
So this is so it was, so this is the San Antonio River. And so this was so it's just south of Paso de las Mujeres. So if you're familiar with the actual site where it's located, just off of 97.
Yeah.
So this is the map here. This is where Las Cabras was.
As a matter of fact, I think it's still under National Park Service.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's part of the UNESCO World Heritage.
Fascinating place. There's some ruins there, not
Yes, ma'am.
Is the Arara land grant beneath Las Cabras?
Is the what land grant?
Arara?
I don't know. I'd have to look at that.
What do you have on your map?
Oh, it says Laguna de las Animas.
Okay.
So between La Mora and Laguna de las Animas over the years is part of the Delgado Ranch that Tom talks about.
When Doña Maria del Carmen Calvillo's paperwork was
Yes.
lost, and she petitioned the Mexican government.
Yes.
She increased her land grant. She
Yes.
increased it because she said, oh, but that's mine also.
Sure. Yeah, there was quite a bit of that going on. Well,
Did we recognize any of the descendants that are here? I think there are some.
absolutely. So I met one of my cousins this evening, who comes from the Leals as well as the Delgados. You want to stand up? You're one of the descendants? Yes, sir? And your name again?
Elisandro de los Santos. I'm a descendant of both through my dad and through my mom.
Which one were your?
Delgado through my mother, and Jimenez through my dad. Jimenez,
Leal.
Leal.
And Diana, my other cousin, Diana Rodriguez. She's also descended from the Delgados. They came in my support. But she's also a Delgado descendant. Any other descendants? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Deborah Travieso before I got married.
Deborah Travieso.
So I'm the
A
seventh.
Travieso?
Yes,
Really?
before I got married. And so I'm the seventh. And also, a Travieso married a Gurberlo. Right?
Yes,
That
ma'am.
was the first, yeah. So the Travieso was the seventh family that came.
Yes, he was.
We don't have a lot of men in our family, like, it's like we
He
kind of lost
married
the name.
Juana Curbelo.
Yeah.
Yes, in 1730 in Cuautitlan.
And you mentioned the land that was called the Mulias?
Mulas.
And I always ask my husband, I said, we've been here for 300 years, where's our land?
There's a professor at one of the universities who currently owns part of that today. Yeah, and I met him, and he talked about being on the original Travieso property. So it's still out there, and it's still being managed.
When I was a kid, George shared information with my dad. Show us the land, right? Oh, it's-
Oh, duh. Thank you.
I just don't know how to put our house in, we remember. So,
Deborah Travieso.
yes.
Nice to meet you. So,
This has been very informative.
yeah, so many of us, you can't be descended from one family. So even though I'm Delgado, right, I'm a direct descendant, I'm also a direct descendant of 7 other families to include Travieso and Curbelo.
Who's Travieso?
Justa Travieso, yeah.
I saw where she branched out, so that's where the relatives all come, the Casanovas, the Gallos, Casanovas.
Right,
That's-
yeah.
So there were the women who branched out and married, and the line of Traviesos is kind of there.
Yeah, they had, Vicente and Juana had, I think, 4 or 5 daughters. Yeah, and so many of them come from them. Yes, any other descendants?
Right here.
Of course! Duh! I've been looking at you and pointing at you all night.
I am a Corbello, a Betancourt, a Rodriguez, and a de Arrocha. All those 4 were my grandparents.
Were they, Maria Josefa Consolacion Leal, were they?
The reburial?
Oh, no, I missed that. That was at Elmendorf. Yes, yes. No, I didn't get to go.
She was, I'm a descendant through her, the Leal.
And I'm also Juan Seguin's granddaughter.
Oh, my.
Yes.
You know, Anthony, I have to say this, because otherwise I'll be processing it all night. But years ago, when I worked for the Air Force, there was a wonderful lady named Sue Orozco. And I didn't know anything about her. And then I ran into one of the parades in San Antonio. And it turned out she was a Travieso, and her brothers were all policemen. And so when you were saying that the first,
Aguacil.
The first sheriff.
was a
Yep.
Travieso, I think, wow, isn't that something?
Yeah, and Cynthia Orozco is a member.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Yes, sir.
You mentioned earlier that you were gonna take a trip or tour to Canary Island?
Yes, sir. So the Canary Island Descendants Association is planning a trip to the Canary Islands around the April-May timeframe of next year. No date has been set yet.
Next year.
Next year, yes, sir. Yeah, originally we're gonna go around the September-October timeframe, but they've changed that, and it's now going to be April-May of next year.
So, I know there's an organization that how do you get established to become Canary Islander as a doctor?
So to join the organization, you have to give them like a pint of blood or something, $5,000. No, actually, there's an application. You do have to be to join as a descendant member, you have to fill out your lineage. So I would recommend, based on what I know of Consolacion, I would recommend that you go the Delgado route, not because I'm Delgado, but because the Jimenez were adopted. Yeah, so you have to be a direct, what they call a natural descendant. So from birth, you have to be a direct descendant. There's an application. I've got a card. I'll give you my card, and then you and I can chat. And it took me 2 years to break through my brick wall, but I eventually made it.
Well, like, my great-great-great-father was married to Maria de Jesus Delgado
Yes.
on mother's side.
Yes, sir.
So that she was a Delgado, but the other one is through like Leal.
And we'll still count it, even though it's from your mother's side. I'm just kidding.
On both sides is,
That's right. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I see that the De La Garzas have 2 areas there. What do you know about them?
So I know that this De La Garza actually marries a Leal. I don't know why. It's written this way in the archives, because when you go to Bexar County and you go to Wilson County and you look up the actual land grants, the deeds today, they refer to Joaquin Leal, who was his father-in-law. So this is Jose Antonio de la Garza, and he marries a Leal. And so the land gets divided, and it then becomes referenced as the De La Garza land grant. Yes, sir.
Where's the Travieso property at? In what area?
So the Travieso property is here, and so you're talking southeast Wilson County and I'm gonna get my directions wrong here, north central Karnes County. Elaine, thank you so much. I really
Oh,
appreciate
thank
the
you.
opportunity.
So thank you again, Anthony, very much, and it was fascinating. And I really hope that our videographer did his job great, because our plans are to have, have recorded this, and our plans are to put it onto our YouTube account, so that
Oh,
you can
nice.
go and see that and share it as you wish. So we would like to present you with something, and it's this little. It's in my hands.
Okay,
But it is, one, to thank you for your service, and two, to thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank
So
you.
this is from the Livonia Historical
oh, thank
Association.
you so much. Appreciate you. Excellent, thank you.
And the other side of it, you flip that over.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Oh,
So that is
beautiful,
the-
yeah, the memorial.
Livonia Veterans Memorial, yes.
Beautiful, thank you so much.
Thank you very,
Appreciate
very
you.
much. Oh, you're just wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So this is